Hands down, this is probably one of the top 5 wildest cases that we've covered so far on this channel. Now, Kouri Richins, she's trying to go after the detectives of this case, pointing fingers at the prosecution team, even going after the victim's family members, who, by the way, y'all, is the same as her family members because she's married to the victim in this case. They were married for about, what, more than 10 years. They had 3 little children together. She's also tried to change the trial over to the big city, Salt Lake City in Utah. Yes, we're in Utah where a lot of crazy stuff happens in Utah. You know, there's also Arizona. There's also, let's throw Florida in there. But we're in Utah right now. And I'm sorry, Kouri, but we're not leaving Summit County. You stuck here. There's also the allegations of her trying to witness tamper. Now, I think that's the reason why the case really blew up even more because of the wild letter that she purportedly wrote to her mom, trying to direct her mom to tell her brother, like, hey, by the way, don't forget to tell my brother that, yeah, they would go to Mexico together and try to procure fentanyl and like some other drugs, along with like some other testimony in there. Now, is it her trying to remind her brother what to testify about because they are based on true facts? Or was she just trying to make up some lies and have her brother going along with it? We'll definitely address that at the end of the video. And then lastly, what else we got here? Oh, we're like basically down to the last wire. You know, we're trying to figure out what evidence is going to be coming in, which witnesses are going to be testifying, because we're already in December 2025 and the trial's going to be happening the beginning of 2026. Oh, wow, time's go by so fast. This is really crazy. Now, if you guys are not familiar with Kouri Richins, there's a recent video that I put out where the attorneys on both sides they were fighting. They were going after each other. It was so bad to the point that the defense team decided to come out and the 3 of them did an interview where they were pointing their fingers at the prosecution team saying that, oh, the prosecution has a duty to correct things that are out in the media. They're not doing that. There are some facts out there that are actually not true, and we need to come out and we need to correct it on the record for the benefit of our client. But it was getting pretty bad to the point where the defense team was trying to sanction the prosecution team, and there's this whole other drama with some other witness. But guys, you know, it's always awkward to do this, but if you guys are enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you're new here, hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you guys come back on again, say hello, and feel free to stop by the live streams whenever we do them. All right, back to the video. Kouri Richins, if you guys are not familiar, she is the woman who had 3 young children at the time, and she wrote a book for them. You know, isn't that nice? Like the kids were grieving because their father had passed away. She was like, oh, you know, there was no books out there for my little kid, so I decided to write my own. She went on like TV, did a whole interview about it. But then after the interview, they found out that she was the subject of investigation for the murder of her own husband. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine writing a book for your children and then realizing, if you're the kids, right, you're realizing that, oh, your mom is the one that possibly murdered my dad. That's pretty messed up. In these documents, we're going to go over everything that's been out so far, and this is quite interesting. But let's start with the Circle R documents. Now, apparently, we're going through the tangles of all the webs of deceit and lies of Kouri Richins. You know, like, she was entangled in some shit. You know, she really was. Kouri Richins, for example, she had a maid that the state says got the drugs for Kouri, got the fentanyl. Now, for some reason, though, I don't know why, maybe this is a quid pro quo thing where Kouri Richins pretended to be a manager of Circle R Ranch. That's what it's called. And she tried to say that, yeah, you know, my maid did community service for us. And this was back in like 2022. However, seemed to be a lie because Kouri Richins was not a manager of no Circle R Ranch. It was actually, in fact, her husband's father. He did own Circle R Livestock, and he also operated a ranch, but Kouri Richins had nothing to do with it. Carmen never did community service because, you know, Carmen, I think she was arrested for a drug charge and Kouri was trying to help her out. But I wonder if this was a quid pro quo for Kouri asking for the huge favor, which is, this is the woman that can get me fentanyl. If I do her a favor, maybe she'll do a favor for me back, you know, later on down the road. I don't know how far she thought this whole thing out, but this was back in 2022. And this was around the same timeline that she was getting into the financial fraud with 2023. being the husband's murder. Oh boy, there's also mention of the college savings and the 529 accounts for her three sons. Now, raise your hand if you guys had family members, parents that saved up for your college education. And then for the rest of y'all, raise your hand. If your parents were like, nah, we didn't save for your college education, good luck with that, you know? Good luck, you on your own. Either get a job or maybe apply for some financial aid. Or maybe you had parents that did try to save, but then they depleted that account. You know, whether it was because things were going bad and they really needed the money, or your parents were like, nah, we are some shady folks. We like to get in some gambling. We owed some money. Or maybe, you know, maybe the lifestyle creep happened where they were living too luxuriously and they weren't making as much anymore and they had to dip into your savings account to cover for it. And then you're kind of left with, damn, I'm on my own. Well, I'm definitely one of those categories, but I was not in the category where my parents saved for our college education. We were just on our own, but luckily we had financial aid to help with us. But anyways, that shit is really stressful. Now, they were saying that Kouri Richins had drained her children's savings accounts. They also drained she also drained the 529 account, which is also a sort of a savings account. When you have children, when they're born, you're allowed to create a savings account that goes toward their college tuition. And so if you're lucky, you might have some parents that contributed to that. Now, apparently, the state is alleging that she drained the children's college education fund and was trying to fund her business. Her business, by the way, she was flipping houses. Okay, she was flipping houses. She had Kouri Richins Realty. Now, whether or not that was a success, I'm actually curious what she's going to testify to in the trial, because the state was like, she didn't know how to run a business, okay? She was on the verge of financial collapse. Kouri Richins, however, maybe she'll testify and say that, like, no, I was doing really well. You know, I was borrowing money, but I was paying it back. So they're trying to say that the reason why she drained her children's account was to stall her own financial collapse. There's also a lawsuit. Kouri Richins was involved in a lawsuit where back in 2020, during the pandemic time, she had sold a home to a couple. Now, in 2022, 2 years later, the couple were like, nah, we are suing you because of material misrepresentation and omissions about the home's condition. I don't have the exact details, but I'm thinking like, okay, what did she do? She lied about the roof. Was it not replaced recently? Did she lie about the pipes being done recently? Did she lie about the HVAC system being replaced? Like, these are things that are very, very costly. If you guys have ever gone through the motions of purchasing a home, by the way, congratulations. But oh my effing God, it is a freaking headache, because you don't know what you're getting yourself into in terms of when you're buying a house, it might look nice on the surface. You know, they might have been like, yeah, we changed the water heater, but then for some reason the water heater goes out on you 2 months in when you're living the house. Or they're like, yeah, you know, the roof was done recently, but then for some reason you might have a leak. Or they're like, yeah, the pipes are done. And then you realize the pipes are like, they're about to bust out or something like that. So maybe, you know, maybe Kouri Richins lied about one of those things. And it was so bad to the point where the couple was like, no, we have to sue. Because, you know, if it's something that's like 5, 10K, you might be like, oh gosh, I don't know if it's worth suing, because how much am I going to spend for attorney's fees, right? But like, I'm thinking maybe this is astronomical. Maybe it's like in the 20 grand, 30 grand range, where it was like so bad to the point where they're like, yeah, we are definitely suing because this is just really effed up. I don't know. I have, as you guys can see, I have my gripes of like home buying and home ownership. Next, the tax payments. I've already covered this on this channel before, but the tax payments thing, oh my goodness. Kouri Richins, yes, she was running her own company, Kouri Richins Realty, but her husband, who's also the victim in this case, Eric Richins, he was running what seemed to be a very successful stone and masonry company. Now, her husband was supposed to be making these like quarterly tax payments, right? However, this sneaky little wife, she was taking those tax payments, and instead of remitting those tax payments, she would give it to herself for her own business, because she was like in the mud with a lot of debt, and she didn't really have the funds to be flipping these houses, it seems like, based on the allegations that the state has listed so far. And just imagine how fucked up that is. You have a partner that you're supposed to love, trust, you know, you are living in the same household, you have children with this person. They were secretly stealing money from your company that was supposed to go for tax payments and giving it to themselves to fund their own business. A lot of shady allegations here. And then lastly, there's talks of shell companies, which I actually have not heard about this yet. Apparently, there were some loans that Kouri Richins had taken, and she listed these like non-operating shell companies, and God knows who, where, maybe the Bahamas or something like that in Caribbean. It's like, are people still doing that, by the way? Is that still a thing? But she listed these like non-operating shell companies where she said that she was like receiving money from. That turned out to be BS. I want to talk about the severance ruling. Back in 2024, this is like roughly about a year ago, the judge decided to. Now, we got to take it back a little bit. There are some charges that Kouri Richins wanted to have separate in the trial. So we got attempted murder, we have aggravated murder. And you're like thinking, Corgi, what do you mean attempted murder and aggravated murder? Well, there's the allegation that she tried to murder her husband on Valentine's Day. And 3 weeks later, she tried to murder her husband again, and that was successful. So Kouri Richins wants to have separate trials. She wants to have trial for a attempted murder and then a separate trial for the aggravated murder. And then also, she's got a lot of financial charges on there. There's like forgery, there's like mortgage fraud. She wants to have the attempted murder with some financial charges on there, and then the aggravated murder with the other financial charges on there separately. So the court is trying to figure out whether or not we are going to be severing attempted murder with aggravated murder. Are we going to be putting that in a separate trial? The court was like, nah, actually, attempted murder and the aggravated murder, we're going to have that in the same trial. The judge ruled that count 1 and 2, which is aggravated murder and the attempted murder, they have a common scheme and plan, and that, as a matter of fact, they share a similar fact pattern. Now, although they happen about 17 days apart, the similar fact pattern being 1, fentanyl was involved, 2, Kouri Richins had procured the fentanyl through the same person, which is her maid. And then there's 3, it was ingested through either a food or maybe through drink. And that lastly 4, the victim was alone. Now, allow me to explain to you guys a little bit, because on Valentine's Day was when Kouri Richins had allegedly attempted to murder her husband the first time. This was her buying an egg sandwich from a nearby diner. She gave it to her husband, and her husband was on his way to work. And when he had this egg sandwich, he essentially had hives and just was not feeling well and decides to take a nap. However, he survives. Nothing happens to him aside from being really, really, really sick. They are saying that Kouri Richins, she sent a text message to her maid and was like, hey, I need like the Michael Jackson stuff. I need something stronger. And it was like a couple days afterwards that her husband actually passed away from the fentanyl poisoning, which would have been the aggravated murder. Now, the judge has to make a determination of whether or not this is going to be prejudicial to Kouri, because technically you're not allowed to use someone's like history, their crime, their other acts of wrongdoing to prove a person's character, that on a particular occasion, that person acted in conformity with that character. Now, for example, if that sounded a little bit confusing to you, it's a little confusing to read too. Now, do you guys remember in the Sarah Boone case? I think this is a pretty good example. A lot of people were kicking and screaming as to why the judge would not allow evidence from Sarah Boone's prior relationship, where she was seemingly also abusive in that relationship. Why couldn't they introduce that into the murder case? Because if someone's abusive in one relationship, well, duh, they're probably going to be abusive in this other relationship. That's because they found that it was too prejudicial, that juries, if they're going to determine whether or not she was abusive, they have to look at the evidence in the current relationship as a standalone. We can't be looking at prior relationships and other crimes that someone may have committed beforehand. And I know that might sound a little aggravating, especially if you have someone that might be like a serial abuser. But, just because you can't look at someone's past, their history, the crimes that they've done, other acts of wrongdoing, just because you can't use that to prove someone's character evidence, there is, however, a non-character component of that, and that is to prove intention, planning, and preparation. So when we look at that, the judge is like, let's look at the text messages that Kouri Richins had wrote during this time frame. The day that she did the attempted murder on Valentine's Day, she texted her paramour. Yes, this woman is a paramour. She had 3 kids with her husband, and she was in a relationship with another dude, okay? She texted him saying, I wish he would go away, or something like, if my husband would just go away, something to that effect. Not only that, a couple weeks afterwards, she had texted the maid who had procured the drugs for her and was like, yeah, I need something stronger. So that right there will show that there was an intent for Kouri Richins to have Eric Richins killed. That is part of the plan. That is part of the preparation. Now, we look at whether or not there is an effect of prejudice here. And the judge was like, okay, well, we want to make sure that the jury is not going to look at propensity or the character evidence, but instead looked at intent, prep, and plan. Again, the judge is going to reiterate that there's no prejudice because the two crimes that happened, the attempted murder and the aggravated murder, they're just way too similar. They're very close in time. They happened about less than a month apart. And there's also text messages that were leading up between those times that would connect the two of them. The evidence in the attempted murder shows the preparation and the planning that led to the aggravated murder. The judge also has to consider the reciprocal, whether or not the aggravated murder evidence supports the attempted murder. Now, we can't look at preparation, we can't look at planning because the attempted murder happened before the aggravated murder. However, there is another component that we can look at, and that is the intent. What did Kouri Richins, what did she want? What was she hoping to achieve? And that is to have Eric Richins killed using fentanyl that she purchased from her housekeeper. And then lastly, having him ingested. Initially, it was the egg sandwich on Valentine's Day. And then now, weeks later, it's the lemon drop shot / Moscow meal. Not sure what the state's theory on that is. We'll have to wait for the trial to happen. So because of this ruling that happened over a year ago, we went from having one trial that focuses on the attempted murder, the aggravated murder, and all the financial charges to having two separate trials. The first trial being the attempted murder, the aggravated murder, some of the financial charges, and then a second trial with the rest of the financial charges. The state is like, hey, judge, I know you already made your determination. I know you already ruled on this, but can we actually bring it back again? And can you actually reconsider? Because we want all the evidence to be presented in one trial. And that is because we want to make sure the jury gets this entire picture, the full story of what went down with Kouri Richins, how she was on the verge of financial ruins and she was, engaging in fraudulent borrowing. It was so bad to the point that she had to murder her husband, Eric Richins. That was the motive of it. And this time, judge, because you didn't do it before, but this time, can you please consider the intrinsic evidence doctrine? Their argument is that Kouri Richins was on this path of fraudulent borrowing since June of 2021, which led to, her being close to having her entire empire collapse. This is intrinsic to the attempted murder. This is also intrinsic to the aggravated murder. So again, we need the entire story because when Kouri Richins, she decided to murder her husband, it wasn't an instant decision. It wasn't like, oh, I woke up one day and let me just murder my husband. Yeah, let's just do it. It was 10 months of all the financial crimes that she was engaging into, and it was insufficient to mitigate her financial, collapse that was soon to be happening. It's not like she jumped to murder, but rather it seems that she resorted to it because once Eric is dead, well, she would financially be able to take the money that, she would get from his death and perhaps use it to pay all of her debts. And it seems like she exhausted all of her options. She tried borrowing money. That didn't work out. She tried forging these documents to get all these loans. But no matter what she was doing, this woman was not a good businesswoman. She was just on the verge of financial collapse. She didn't want to have her fraud to be outed in the public. She wanted to cover her debts. And her murdering Eric Richins was a pecuniary gain. That was her motive. When the court determines its ruling, it has to make sure that this evidence is not going to, cause a waste of time. It's not going to confuse issues. It's not going to mislead the juries. And the state is arguing, saying that, well, it's not going to waste any time. I mean, honestly, we're not going to call any additional witnesses. There might be some new exhibits, but that's about it, Judge. And I'm like thinking, okay, maybe sure. I don't know. Maybe you're downplaying a little bit, state. But the state is ultimately going to make the argument that, Judge, let's have one trial. Let's have one trial where the attempted murder, the aggravated murder, and all the financial crimes are included in this trial. Because I get it. If you were the state, if I was the state, wouldn't you want to just try this all in one trial? Why sever into two? And then you would have to, I'd rather just do it all in one. Let's just get it all done. So that's what the state is arguing for. Now, in terms of what types of evidence that the state wants to have admitted, Oh boy, let's talk about the defendant's notes. Now, the state wants to pre-admit some of the exhibits here, and one of them were these notes that Kouri Richins had handwritten. I think this is the diary. Oh boy, so she was arrested on May 8th, 2023, and then November 7th, 2023. This is about a year and a half later. They were able to recover her diary or something that had her handwritten notes, where she basically had a firsthand account of what went down the night that Eric Richins had died. This has a timeline, some details of the event, what he ate, when he ate. That seems a little suspicious, doesn't it? But it's kind of odd to me that she decided to hang on to this for so long. Is it hubris because she thought she wasn't going to get caught? That people were going to buy the poor mourning mother of three, the book author who wrote this grieving book for her children? Was she just confident that she was not going to get caught? Maybe. Or was she planning on keeping this diary, as maybe she put in some false information in there, to try to, like, if she were to get caught, information in this diary would be used to help her. But I honestly think it probably ended up backfiring on her. So the state is going to argue that, yes, this is authentic. She did write it. It's not hearsay because these are Kouri Richins' own statements. And that, yeah, it's relevant because it shows when and what Eric Richins ingested, and that she was probably the one that poisoned him with the fentanyl. Now, Kouri Richins was probably trying to use this diary to mislead the investigators. But like I said, I did think that it ended up backfiring on her because there might have been some other information that she didn't think was going to kick her in the ass. Now, additional things that they want to pre-admit before the trial happens. There's an interview that Kouri Richins gave. And at this point, this woman was not arrested. She did not have to give an interview. But when your husband passes away under suspicious circumstances, you want to make it seem like you are very open. Like, I have nothing to hide. Guys, come on into my house. Let me entertain you. And yeah, ask me whatever you want. So the detectives came in because there were new detectives that were being assigned to the case, I think. They wanted to stop by, introduce themselves to her, be like, hey, I am the new guy that's on this case. We're going to be investigating your husband's death. And what's interesting was that Kouri Richins, about a year ago, she was trying to have this entire interview thrown out, because the detectives should have known that she has representation with an attorney at this point. However, the issue is that Kouri Richins was not in custody and she was not arrested at this time. That is what the court determined. Because if you're arrested and if you evoked your, right to have an attorney present, then they better respect that. However, if you haven't been arrested yet, if you're not in custody, well, shit, you better keep your mouth closed. I don't know, man. You better keep your mouth closed. But Kouri Richins, during this interview, it was, I think, surreptitiously recorded. I think they did have it transcribed. But in this interview, they talk about Eric Richins' health history. They talk about the night of Eric Richins' death. They talk about the phone deletions. I haven't seen any portion of this interview or the transcriptions yet, but man, confronting her with the phone deletions, I wonder what she had to say about that. There was the living trust that was being discussed. This is the living trust that Kouri Richins thought she was the beneficiary of. However, her husband secretly changed it to his sister because he didn't want to have Kouri Richins in charge of the finances if anything were to happen to him. There's also discussion of the life insurance policy and then the power of attorney. And again, the state is going to make an argument that this is authentic. We have the recording, we have the transcription. This is not hearsay because these are statements of a party opponent. Kouri Richins, she's yapping her mouth, and yeah, she might have said some things that are not beneficial to her, but we can use it against her. And yes, this is going to be relevant. Now, there's also an email. We actually have this email that the state wants to pre-admit. Oh my goodness. After she did the interview with the detectives, she sends them this email, and there's like emojis in there. There's a LOLs. It's so casual. It's so cavalier that it might seem like she has nothing to hide, or it just may seem like a little too chill and relaxed for someone that's grieving. Yes, the time has passed by, but still, your husband passed away. You got 3 kids. Seems pretty tragic. All right, guys, be prepared to be cringe. Here's a follow-up email she sent to the detectives. Hey, after you guys left Friday, I was trying to make sure dates were as accurate as possible, but I always feel like something was last year, and it was actually several years ago, crying emoji. Anyway, you asked me when my doctor had prescribed quiatapine. Oh, by the way, quiatapine, they found that in Eric Richins' system He didn't have a prescription for it, but guess who did? Kouri did. I wonder if she gave him quetiapine so he would be more relaxed state, and maybe it'd be easier to drug him. Ooh, who fucking knows? I believe I told you a few years ago before Eric passed. However, I emailed my doctor today to get a specific date, and this was her response. ... I don't even know if it matters for anything, but it was bothering me, crying, laughing emoji. Also, Eric's company was started in 2010, not 2012. I think I might have said 2012. That's when we got married. LOL. Again, none of this probably matters, but it was bothering me. ... Oh man, it totally gives the vibes of, hey guys, I just want to help you guys. So the detective replies back saying, thanks for the clarification, Kouri. I don't know that it matters either, but I appreciate the communication. All right, thanks, Chad. Now we got this long email. It is such a casual email. Here are parts of the email that really stood out to me. Eric was the coach of the soccer team. That's her husband. And I'm the annoying mom on the sideline that never stops yelling, tongue out face emoji. We don't miss games or tournaments. We're a huge soccer family. You asked redacted about any exotic vacations I've taken since Eric's passing. I went on 2 trips last year. Oh my gosh, I wanted to go on these trips with her paramour. Oh gosh. 1, my kids tried out the soccer camp in SLC to qualify to play in Spain in June, and both my kids made it. So yes, I took them to Spain in October 2022. I took my kids and my mom came with us in August of 2022 in Mexico. As I hope you understand, the months prior to this since Eric's death has been hard to deal with. Eric's affair was the same year I moved out. I do wonder, did Eric really have an affair, or is she just making this up, or did they agree to mutually see other people? I don't know if I take Kouri's. I don't know, man. She'd be lying about a lot of things. The trust was created as well as him looking into a divorce. I never actually moved out. I moved my clothes out 1 weekend to make Eric understand I'm not kidding about leaving him. If he doesn't get things with redacted, I did this on a Thursday or Friday when he was out of town. I was home Monday. I never stayed another night at that other house. Eric and I figured things out like most couples do. Redacted was her name. He changed her name in his phone so I wouldn't know about it. And honestly, we worked things out. And after that, I never went through his phone again to see if he changed it back. But you have his phone and can check. I don't know, man. I feel like, honestly, if you had someone that cheated on you and you're still in that relationship with that person, I feel like you would check to see if they changed the phone number contact back to try to hide it again. I'm just saying, maybe I'm just paranoid. Eric and I went to redacted counseling in Commas 801. We only went about 4 times. Maybe it wasn't for us. Redacted and redacted are the same person, so I'm assuming you know that. Haha. I'm also assuming that redacted told Woody her husband got a call from him and gave all this information. Lol, yet he didn't even go to talk to the detectives. Ironic how these things work. No, Eric and I did not have financial problems ever. What about you, Kouri? Did you have any financial problems, girl? Yes, Eric made more money than me. Do you make more money than your wives? Have I ever been financially reliant on Eric in the 5 years? Absolutely not. Eric did not want me working because 1, his first wife cheated on him with a guy at work. And what about you, Kouri? I wonder if she told the detectives that she was seeing another person. 2, the whole thing was redacted. 3, Eric wanted us to live with a typical conservative life where the man takes care of his family and the wife is a homemaker, wife, mom, and that's it. That's not my personality, not the way I was raised. I am very independent. Even when I stayed home with my kids the first few years, I was in grad school for years because I wanted to do more than be a homemaker. And I did. And when I did and started my business, it took some adjusting, but Eric and I were fine with it. We hired my nanny and everything worked out. I know what time I went to bed that night. There is no hole in my story. Hopefully by obtaining 4 phone record documentation, you guys can see this too. Happy to clarify or prove anything else you may need. I just want this over. I just want our lives back and to move on and grieve and mourn my husband without looking over my shoulder constantly for you guys or the idiotic private investigator or the Richins family. Whatever I can do to help close this out, just ask and I'll give you or tell you whatever you want to know. Please check the lab on those gummies. Look at her directing the detectives to do their job. P.S. Chad, I hear you also... Oh, gosh. So she was trying to allege that the gummies may have had some fentanyl on there. However, when they checked his toxicology report, there was no THC in his stomach. So no THC, no gummies. Sounds like a lie. And this is where she tries to connect with one of the detectives. P.S. Chad, I hear you also know our good friends Redacted. Their son and my son play on the same soccer team. When Eric passed, Redacted took over coaching. You guys could even chat with them if you feel necessary. Kouri Richins. She's checked off all the things of what not to do, okay, when you're like accused of a crime. She's got the financial ruin aspect. She's got the fraud aspect. There's the claiming the life insurance policy of your significant other when they pass away. They even got the Google searches. She's got a diary where she wrote everything down, what happened the night of the murder. There's also the alleged witness tampering. And then her now running her mouth because they want to include her jail calls, her text messages. Like, this woman does not know how to keep her mouth shut. Apparently, she was talking about pain pills that she got from the housekeeper. There was the Valentine's Day incident. There was her consulting with a divorce attorney back in 2021. She talks about what happens after she went to bed. There's apparently Eric Richins' attitude towards suicide. She like transferred to herself and the mortgage of her mom's home. I don't know if this is her talking about like, maybe some more fraud that she was doing where she was basically screwing over everyone in her life, her mom included. There's a toxicology report of Eric Richins and then Hayden Jeffs. So Hayden Jeffs was a witness in this case. However, he passed away in a motorcycle accident. Kouri had allegedly reached out to Hayden asking for fentanyl and some drugs. Now, I think that it was reported that the mom was saying that Hayden was running his mouth. I think this is the one. So that might be the call that they're referencing to. But man, Kouri is just like, she's just letting it all out there. She's having these conversations with her mom, with her brother, with her family members. And y'all got to remember, when you're incarcerated, they are listening into every single phone call because they want to use that against you. You just don't learn, do you? I feel like being her attorney it must be such a headache. Let's talk about what type of evidence Kouri Richins wants to be let in the trial. Now, to me, these seems like evidence that would attack the character of the victim in this case, which was her deceased husband. There was an assault that apparently happened where she told Eric Richins' dad back in July 2022 that Eric had punched her, gave her a black eye and lip, and this happened 2 years ago. Her phone was busted, but she did video it. Now, she offered to send proof of this evidence to Jean Richins, but she never did. I wonder why. There's no video, there's no evidence. The state is arguing that, well, this is pretty unreliable because we only have Kouri Richins' testimony. We ain't got no other evidence to back this up. Kouri Richins also wants to introduce the fact that Eric Richins did drugs in high school, y'all, in high school. When did you graduate high school? And if you don't want to share with that, that's completely fine. But Eric Richins graduated high school back in 2000. Okay, back in 2000. Can you imagine if someone wants to use something against you that happened way over 20 years ago? It's pretty wild, right? They didn't even know each other back in 2000. They met in 2010, and I think they got married about a few years after that. But apparently, same time, I don't know, something was going on in July 2022 where Kouri Richins was just like divulging all this information to Eric Richins' father. I don't know if she's trying to turn his family against him. Maybe that's what she was doing. I don't know. Maybe she was just venting. But she had told Eric Richins' father that, yeah, Eric, he abused his mom's prescription back in high school. Jean was like, I don't remember that. I'm denying that. Now, the state is arguing that, again, this is also unreliable because we only have Kouri Richins' testimony. We ain't got no other evidence to back this up. She didn't even know Eric Richins back then. How would she know? This was also 20 years ago. If it did happen, this was 20 years ago. And it's not a continual cause of conduct. Like, for example, if Eric was doing this back in high school and then throughout his entire life history, he had issues with abusing drugs. There is just no pattern of that. Now, Kouri Richins even said that, well, to back my claim, Eric Richins had knee surgery and he was suffering. It was so bad. He wouldn't take the painkillers because he didn't want to be addicted to it again. Instead, he took ibuprofen. The state is arguing that we have a father of three who was 39 years old at the time of his death. How are we going to use something that happened 25 years ago against him? This just seems like she wants to attack his character. And of course, Kouri Richins is going to say, well, Eric abused drugs, and that's how there was fentanyl in his system the night that he died. There was an interview that was mentioned. I think it's one of the children were interviewed. This was back about a year ago. We don't have information on that. Of course not, because the children are minors. I believe when their father was murdered, I think the children were like really long. Was it like 2, 6, and 9 or something like that? 2, 6, 2, 5, and 7. Very, very young. I think one of them should be approaching teenager now. And man, it's a tough one. Now we're going to get into the Crozier interview. Remember, the attorneys were fighting over this. They were going after each other. The defense attorney specifically was pointing fingers at the state, saying that they're hiding exculpatory evidence. And exculpatory evidence is evidence that could be beneficial to my client, and it could show that my client didn't have anything to do with the murder. So apparently, let's get into the timeline really briefly. But I did do a whole video about this if you guys want to do more of a deep dive. But in May 4, 2023, the detectives did an interview with the drug dealer. This is the drug dealer that Kouri Richins got the drugs from, but she didn't get it from him directly. She went through her maid. The maid was like, I got a connection, went to this drug dealer, and they interviewed him. The drug dealer was like, yeah, I sold fentanyl to the maid, and I'm rejecting any possibility that she had asked for oxy or something like that. Instead, I gave her fentanyl. 2 years afterwards, they decide to do a follow-up interview, and this is for trial preparation. And we're like 2 years afterwards, that would have been like, what, in March of 2025? Well, the reason why it was trial preparation is because the trial was supposed to happen way earlier this year, but it got pushed back to next year. So they're doing trial preparation. We've got the detective there. We got the state prosecutor there. And the state prosecutor was basically out reviewing the outline of the summary of the previous interview. Now, in the affidavits of the detective and the affidavit of the prosecutor, they said that there wasn't something specific, like one of the bullets, that he didn't remember. He just broadly said that he was unable to recall all the details because it happened 3 years ago. So the court was like, okay, well, I'm going to accept the detectives and the prosecutor's version. However, good luck, y'all, because I don't know how this guy's going to testify. Like, he might say one thing in the interview, and then when he's actually testifying in the stand, he might be saying another. Good luck with that, y'all. Just like, you guys know what you guys are getting yourselves into. Now, the state, they made an argument saying that when he made the statement that, his memory wasn't great, that's not exculpatory evidence. And that's the reason why we didn't report to the defense about this. So the court took a look at that, examined, and was like, I mean, he didn't contradict his statement that he had, in his interview in 2023. The statement of being unable to recall all the details, that could make sense because, maybe it is a broad statement. It's reasonable to view that as someone that just has memory issues, or, I mean, that happens to all of us, right? As more time passes by, your memory is just not as good. You're expected to have that dissipation. Now, the state, they were like, yeah, that's not exculpatory evidence. The judge was like, yeah, I can see that. However, you got to look at it from the defense's perspective. This information could also technically be valuable to the defense because if the defense learns that this witness has some memory issues, well, they can investigate into why there are memory issues. And that is because the affidavit of the witness, he's going to say that, well, when I made that initial statement with the fentanyl thing, I was detoxing. I wasn't in my right mind. My mind wasn't great. Now that it's years later, my memory is a lot better now. I don't know. So he could technically testify about what he initially interviewed about. However, when we watch those trials, and if someone claims that their memory is better now than it was before, we have that line of questioning from the brilliant attorneys where they're like, is your memory better now than it was 2 weeks ago? Oh, really? So you're saying memory gets better with time? So you're telling me that if you were to recall what happened a month ago, your memory is better today than it was a month ago? Yeah, right? It doesn't really make sense. Typically, as time goes by, your memory of it could get worse. Although sometimes when you marinate on something, you might have revelations and realize like, oh, wait, actually, this did happen. I forgot about it. But are those false memories? I don't know. Could be, maybe. So the court will side, a little bit on the defense and say that technically this was exculpatory evidence. The state was required, but in this case, they failed to disclose to the defense right away. However, we're not going to, put on any sanctions. There's no breach of trust between the state and the defense. the state seemingly just misjudged the situation, and that my ruling is going to give the state guidance on how they should deem what's exculpatory and what's not. Don't let it happen again, though. Now, y'all remember the drama between Kouri and her sister-in-law? It was so bad at the point that Kouri allegedly punched her sister out and like attacked her, and cops were called and everything. It was a whole damn mess. But she was trying to compel Kouri Richins to comply with the subpoena. The subpoena was to provide the financial activities of the trust. This is the same trust that Kouri thought she was the beneficiary of. But then after her husband passed away, she found out that her husband changed it to his sister. It's almost like she did it all for no reason. They also wanted the copies of the checks that were written to investigators or anyone that was involved in the prosecution of Kouri Richins. So the judge was looking at this and he was like, no, I'm denying this without prejudice because you didn't even give a chance for the opposing counsel to meet and confer with you guys. Like, y'all need to make a good effort to meet with each other, discuss about this before you try to get the court to, take any action. So not only that, but the request that you're making, it's also overly broad. The court has no benefit of the counsel's discussion because, again, the discussion never happened. You guys need to meet. You guys need to talk it out. And then once we discuss on what is the proper scope of this, then I will make a decision if I need to. But y'all need to work it out first. So get that together. Oh boy, we're back to the walk the dog letter that I mentioned earlier. The walk the dog letter is seemingly a letter that Kouri Richins was writing in order to witness tamper. The witness was her own brother. Now, the state wants to admit the first 3 pages, saying that this shows consciousness of guilt. Why would this woman try to witness tamper if she wasn't guilty? Why would she engage in that? Oh. But the defense argued back saying, no, this letter was written in a vacuum. It wasn't meant to be sent to anyone. She was only writing to herself. No one was going to be the recipient of it. However, the state fights back and says, no, it seems like Kouri had the intention of sending it to her mom because, one, she rehearsed sending it to her mom by having the letter up while they're doing the video chat while she was in the incarceration, when she was in the jail. And she did this because she wanted to bypass the jail screening. So if you're going to pass off materials to other people, they probably screen it to make sure you're not doing any weird shit. However, if you're on the video chat and she just posts up like this, it's going to bypass that. Now, the other argument that the defense makes was like, well, it's not like she was threatening anyone. There's no harm. She's not trying to witness tamper. But the state argues back saying, well, just because she wasn't trying to threaten anyone doesn't mean that no witness tampering was happening. The defense at some point, they did change their story about what this letter was about. Initially, they said that Kouri was just trying to remind her brother of what went down, and she needed to make sure that the brother knew how to testify. But we got to remember, Kouri Richins initially said that, no, this is a draft for a book. This is a draft for a book. I was writing a book about me and dad going to Mexico, getting drugs. I wasn't trying to witness tamper. I was writing a book. This is fiction. These people are stupid. She was on the phone call with her mom complaining about this. But now the news story is, oh, it wasn't a book. It was to remind the brother of his testimony. Yeah, totally it. Now, the defense did reply back to the state saying, yeah, judge, strike the state's reply because this is improper. We had this argument back in the beginning of this year in March and April 2025. The state wants to wait 8 months later to make this reply. That's just unacceptable. That's just horrible. Just strike it off the record. I told you guys, there is a lot of drama happening between the two sides, and we are getting very, very, very close to the trial. It's going to be happening. Oh, we do have a pretrial conference in the beginning of January. So I look forward to the new year. But man, a lot of things have been unraveling this case. I hope I did a pretty decent job of trying to break it down with you guys. Typically, I sit here, I read the court documents to you guys, but sometimes it's like, let me just summarize it to you. Let me just make it easier for you guys. But if you guys do miss me reading the court documents, I can go back to doing the streams. I can read the court documents to y'all. But other than that, that is it for Kouri Richins. I have a lot of catch up to do with the Blake Lively, Baldoni stuff because, oh my God, I don't know how people are caught up with that. They dropped so many documents on the court docket. It is just a lot. You guys haven't seen my video yet. We did do a recap so far of all the evidence, that's dropped in Baldoni and Blake Lively. that trial, I think I heard some news that it might be pushed back. They were slated for March 2026. So maybe it'll get pushed back. And, like I said, I'm not surprised. There was just so much happening in that case. If you guys want to get caught up, watch my recent video. And I have to do a follow-up video because the first video took so long. I was like, no, we got to do a two-part series. All right, guys. Other than that, guys, I hope you guys have a good one. Take care. And yeah, I miss you guys. We haven't done the live streams in a while, but if something pops up and it's worth doing a live stream, I will do the live streams. Other than that, I will just continue doing these videos and keep you guys caught up with all of these cases that we've been covering. And I think that's about it. Oh, sure. Oh, hi, sure. Don't eat your feet. He's so cute. All right, guys, have a good one. Take care. And I will see y'all later. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Would love to have you guys come back again, say hello, and see you guys a different day. Bye.